So we talked about last week the Oklahoma Sooners pursuing another transfer portal defensive lineman. So far, we've thrown out two names, Brandon Lane and Aiden Huntington. Now, you saw that Brandon Lane has committed to Louisville, so that really leaves two options for Oklahoma, at least that they're publicly going after. And I want to talk about the recent sneaky good defensive lineman that they recently got an announcement that they're going to be getting an official visit for, and talk about how he could impact this team, because statistically, this looks like a guy that could make an impact right away. Before we do that, though, I need to hear from y'all. So join the discussion, jump down in the comments below, and let me know y'all's thoughts, because Oklahoma has like 6 or 7 guys that are over 300 pounds on the interior defensive line. And I want to know if you guys think they need to take another defensive lineman, whether it's for depth or potential starting abilities. But we got to start with what Todd Bates and Brent Venables have done, because they've stacked this defensive line. You've got DeJoun Terry, who's 6'3", 322 pounds. You've got 5-star defensive lineman David Stone at 6'3", 300. You've got Jaden Jackson at 6'2", 300. Devon Sears, who I believe is at 300 pounds now, and he's 6'3", which, again, and I'm going to continue to say this, Devon Sears showed out in the spring game, and that's a guy that you expect could make a huge impact for you this upcoming season. Grayson Halton, 6'2", 300 pounds. Like, you love what Todd Bates and Brent Venables have done here, especially with adding a guy like Dominic Williams, who comes in at 6'2", 310 pounds. A guy at TCU that had tremendous production. But you saw Oklahoma lose Jermayne Lole in the portal, and then they started to kind of test the waters, see who else was out there. Brandon Lane was kind of the name to know. And then it kind of fell off, and you heard Aiden Huntington, because Aiden Huntington last season, 62 total tackles, 8.5 sacks, 28 solo tackles, 2 pass breakups, 3 forced fumbles. Like, he's a man at 6'1", 281 pounds. Potentially could play in that 3T situation, but maybe in the 4I. Here's what you've got with Aiden, though. Like, we're not getting a whole lot by reading the tea leaves with him, especially with what he's liking or looking at on Twitter. Like, you just, it seems like this is one that you're not able to really read into from the tea leaf perspective. So you've got to kind of look at what else is Oklahoma doing. Well, they just announced, a Pete Nakos over at On3 just announced that Oklahoma is going to be getting an official visit from the 6'2", 270-pound transfer defensive lineman. He's a junior out of Jacksonville State, Chris Hardie. Now, Jacksonville State, that's where Zach Alley came from. So there's already a connection between defensive coordinator and defensive lineman, and you would expect that's probably going to come into play here. Last year specifically, though, he had 60 total tackles. 33 of those were solos. He had 1 pass breakup, 8.5 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, and 1 interception that he took back for 58 yards. So Chris Hardie is a guy that statistically probably could be a really good player for you. But again, I think along with Aiden Huntington, the question we ask ourselves is, he's a little undersized compared to some of the other interior defenders that you have. It feels like he would fit more of like a defensive end. So you have to wonder, would this be a guy that could play in a 3T situation, or would he play in a 4-man setup? That's kind of what I'm looking at, and those are the questions that I have. But regardless, you trust Zach Alley and Brent Venables, and even Todd Bates, because Todd Bates is definitely going to be in on this recruitment. You trust their evaluation here, even if the size doesn't look like it's there. But according to PFF, he had a 73.4 defensive grade last year, a run defense grade of 78.2, a pass rush grade of 64.5. And you look at his game-by-game breakdown, and he performed well even against some of the better teams on his schedule. And he played a total of 669 snaps. He's not going to have to do that at Oklahoma. So here at Oklahoma, you're going to be able to maximize performance out of a guy like Chris Hardie. Again, I just kind of wonder where he fits in the scheme. At 270, you can be freakishly athletic, but you might be a little undersized being on the interior. So I bet they could get him from 270 to 280, maybe 282. I feel like a 15-pound jump is probably too big of a gap to get him from summer to September. But this is an interesting note that Oklahoma's getting an official visit from this guy, because I've kind of wondered who Oklahoma is going to target in the defensive line, because I feel like they want to. And maybe they take two. Maybe they take Aiden Huntington and Chris Hardie. But at some point or another, you have to imagine both guys are going to look at the depth situation in Oklahoma and think maybe playing time will be extremely limited or harder to get a hold of if both guys end up here. So I have not heard anything about Oklahoma being out on Aiden Huntington. So I guess we have to assume they're still very well in it. When we announced that he was on campus, because there were some people that were saying he was on campus, he actually wasn't, or I don't know. That whole situation was a little confusing. So I'm not sure if Huntington has actually made it to campus for Oklahoma yet. He did post something that showed Norman, Oklahoma, but he wasn't actually in Norman. Chris Hardie, though, will be here this weekend, and that's one Oklahoma fans will have to keep your eyes on, especially as you look to go into the SEC. Like, you need those big bodies to go against some of these bigger offensive linemen. So I want to hear from y'all. Join the discussion. Jump down in the comments below. Give me your thoughts and your opinions on what you guys think around the defensive line. Like, do you think this would be a good pickup for Oklahoma? Additionally, if you guys have not already, and you guys have made it this far, make sure you guys hit that like and you hit that subscribe button.